I, 24-year-old male, am the oldest of my siblings. My mom just announced that she is pregnant with her affair, now husband's, baby. I have disposable income. Because of this, I like to spend a lot of it on the three oldest siblings, an 18-year-old female, a 17-year-old female, and a 14-year-old male. Throughout the story, I will just call them siblings 1, 2, and 3 respectively. This will become relevant later. My boyfriend and I had been planning a summer trip, and I wanted to bring siblings 1, 3. I also wanted to make it very special for the oldest because she recently graduated and is now attending a top 20 university, so I told her that she can bring a friend. The trip is in 3 days, but we plan to pick them up today so we can all go to my boyfriend's mother's birthday party. Anyway, I went to my mother's husband's house to pick up my siblings, and my stepsister, 15-year-old female, was there. Now, for more context, my mom got remarried not even a month ago, so I've only ever interacted with this girl a total of 8 times. As we are leaving, my stepsister asked where we were going and when we were coming back. Sibling 1 tells her about the trip. Stepsister asks if she can go. I tell her no, it's too last minute. My mom asks, why can't you take her? Your flight doesn't leave for 3 days. You can get another ticket. I then said again that it was too last minute. My mom asks again, if you have money to bring sibling 1's friend, why can't you bring your sister? Stepsister starts to cry. My mom blames me for stepsister crying and asks again why I can't bring her, and if stepsister can go instead of sibling 1's friend. I respond with, this is a present for sibling 1. Also, I'm not going to cancel on her friend. My mom says, you need to put family first. I respond with, I barely know stepsister and she's not even family to me. My mom then starts crying and pulls the how can you stress me out like this, I'm pregnant card. I respond with, I honestly don't give a FK about you being pregnant when you shouldn't even be pregnant at 42. My mom cries more and says I need to treat all my siblings the same and it's unfair to single stepsister out. Siblings 1, 3 don't deserve more than my other siblings and stepsister. I respond to that with, stepsister wouldn't have even felt singled out if you hadn't made it such a big deal. Also, siblings 1, 3 are all fully related to me and, in my opinion, do deserve more. I left and the whole drive my mom was calling and texting me nonstop. I called her back and she started yelling at me, saying that she is going to tell the police I kidnapped her kids. I told her I have text proof of her agreeing to let siblings 2 and 3 on the trip, and if she even tries to escalate this further, I will go to the cops with all the neglectful things she has done to her kids. The past couple of hours, she has been basically calling me an a-hole for not making my stepsister feel welcome, treating my younger siblings unfairly, and putting her through stress while pregnant. I did feel bad about putting her through stress and feel that maybe I shouldn't have gotten so angry in front of stepsister. I don't know, am I the a-hole? To add, please don't come for stepsister, she's like 15, and we were all yelling. I don't know why she was crying, but I don't want to assume either. Also, I regret the 42 comment, and I believe that women can have kids at whatever age they want as long as there are no risks. My mom is not a first-time mother, and the doctor told her that pregnancy was risky in 2019 when she was pregnant with my current youngest sibling. Almost forgot. I wrote brother's mother's house, meant to write boyfriend's mother's house. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the idiot one. You do not know this child, whether she has special needs or if she will obey you during the trip. 2, this is your mother's husband's child. Sounds like he wasn't there. You can't just take off with her. Your mother has zero authority to give permission. 3, you are not obligated to pay for nor care for an unknown child on a sibling bonding vacation. Comment 2, not the idiot. While I am not a professional therapist, what your mom did was very manipulative, and it sounds like it's not the first time, as you have stated there has been neglect. Good for you to have boundaries, and while it's not her fault, your stepsister is a stranger. You do not know who she is. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So a lot has happened since that whole mess with my mom and stepsister. After we got back from the trip, things were tense. My mom was still upset, and I was trying to avoid any more drama. But then something unexpected happened. Sibling 1, who had been really quiet since we got back, came to me and said she wanted to talk. She told me that she felt guilty about the whole situation with stepsister and that she thought maybe we should have tried harder to include her. I was surprised because I thought she was on my side, but I could see where she was coming from. She said that stepsister was probably feeling really left out and that maybe we should try to get to know her better. I decided to take her advice and reached out to stepsister. I invited her to hang out with us one weekend just to see if we could bond a little. At first she was hesitant, but eventually she agreed. We went to a local amusement park, and to my surprise, we actually had a good time. Stepsister opened up a bit, and I started to see her as more than just my mom's husband's kid. She told me about her interests, her friends, and even some of her struggles with fitting into our new family dynamic. But then I made a mistake that changed everything. I mentioned to stepsister that I had been thinking about inviting her on our next trip. I thought it would make her feel included and show her that I was trying to make an effort. However, I didn't realize that my mom was within earshot. She overheard the conversation and immediately jumped to conclusions. She thought I was trying to make up for the previous trip by planning another one without consulting her first. My mom confronted me later that day, accusing me of trying to undermine her authority and make her look bad. She said that I was trying to buy stepsister's affection and that it wasn't fair to the rest of the family. I tried to explain that I was just trying to make things right, but she wouldn't listen. She was convinced that I was trying to take over her role as a parent. The fallout from this was huge. My mom and I had a massive argument, and she ended up grounding stepsister for going behind her back. Stepsister was devastated and blamed me for making things worse. She stopped talking to me, and things between us went back to being awkward and tense. Meanwhile, siblings 2 and 3 were caught in the middle. They didn't know who to side with, and it was causing a lot of stress for them. Sibling 2, who was usually very laid back, started having anxiety attacks, and sibling 3 became more withdrawn. I felt terrible for putting them through this, and I didn't know how to fix it. In the midst of all this, I found out something that added another layer to the mess. My boyfriend's mother, who we had visited for her birthday, pulled me aside one day and told me that she had overheard my mom talking to her husband about me. Apparently, my mom had been saying that I was trying to turn my siblings against her and that I was a bad influence. She even suggested that I was trying to sabotage her marriage. I was shocked and hurt. I couldn't believe that my mom would say those things about me. This revelation made me realize that there was a lot more going on than I had initially thought. My mom was clearly feeling threatened by my relationship with my siblings and stepsister, and she was lashing out in ways that were damaging to everyone involved. I knew I had to do something to address this, but I wasn't sure what. I decided to talk to my mom directly. I went to her house and asked if we could have a serious conversation. At first, she was defensive, but eventually, she agreed to listen. I told her everything I had been feeling and thinking, and I asked her to do the same. It was a difficult conversation, but it was also necessary. During our talk, my mom revealed some things about her past that I hadn't known before. She told me about her own struggles with feeling inadequate as a parent and how she had always felt like she was failing us. She admitted that she was scared of losing us and that she had been projecting those fears onto me. It was a raw and emotional conversation, but it helped me understand where she was coming from. We didn't resolve everything that day, but it was a start. We agreed to try to communicate better and to work on rebuilding our relationship. I also promised to make more of an effort to include stepsister and to be more mindful of my mom's feelings. Since then, things have been slowly improving. Stepsister and I are still working on our relationship, but we're making progress. Sibling 2's anxiety has been getting better, and sibling 3 is starting to open up again. My mom and I are still figuring things out, but we're talking more and trying to be more understanding of each other. It's been a challenging month, but I feel like we're moving in the right direction. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for kicking out a teenager who left our home vulnerable to a break-in? So a little backstory, my husband's friend moved in with us somewhat temporarily because he got kicked out of his family home. He is 16 years old. He's been a great guest, honestly, pays his rent, takes us out to dinner, and cooks for us. Everything has been very nice. He works a graveyard shift, so we only see him a few hours a day, usually in the evenings. Anyways, a few weeks ago, someone broke into our house at around 2:30. Luckily, our bedroom has a deadbolt, So I locked myself in and told him I was calling the police. He grabbed a few things and booked it. Luckily, we have security cameras, so the cops were able to find him quite easily. That is being taken care of right now. The things that made me extremely confused at the time was that our security system didn't go off. We set it every night, and if a door is opened and the system isn't disarmed after a certain amount of time, the police are contacted. The night of the incident, the system was disarmed, and I felt like an idiot. I felt like I put myself in danger. That was until my husband's friend, I'll just call him Dan from now on, told my husband and me the truth. Dan had been disarming the security system and leaving the front door unlocked every single night. He told us it was easier to just come home after a long shift and not have to deal with unlocking the door every day and turning off the system. My husband and I were gobsmacked. I flat out told Dan he couldn't live here anymore. He was surprised for some reason, but luckily my husband backed me up. He told Dan he wasn't going to risk me to keep a roof over his idiot head. He'd rather have me and lose him. Dan was doubly surprised. Apparently he thought my husband would bend for him, but he reluctantly agreed. He's now completely moved out. All he brought was a computer and his clothes, so it didn't take long. Now some of our mutual friends are getting in our business and telling us we're bad people because Dan has had to couch surf and even had to stay in a shelter one night. I told the mutual friends that were complaining that they were right, and I'll tell Dan they're stepping up and taking him in, which obviously made them backtrack immediately. I'm just tired of people who are supposed to be our friends calling us terrible people and being so hypocritical because no one is willing to help out Dan like we did. It's just really starting to guilt me though. So am I the idiot for making our friend basically homeless for causing a break-in? To add, my husband wasn't home at the time of the break-in. Unfortunately, he was away with work. It was literally just me. Made it 10 times scarier, to be honest. XD also, Dan has always been the problem child of the group. My husband's group of friends have been friends since middle high school, and Dan was always the wild card funny one of the group. He barely even graduated. We're all full-grown adults with houses, partners, and some even families. Most of the group are very kind and well-rounded people that I get along with and respect, which makes them hounding us that much more hurtful. While Dan is the creepy guy who can't keep a girlfriend and lived with his parents until he couldn't anymore. They've all physically, emotionally, and financially supported Dan since their early teens. So I feel like all of them, my husband included, have an extremely toxic relationship with him. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. You did everything correctly, right down to telling off the mutual friends. If Dan has rent money to give you, then he can get a room somewhere else. He was dumber than a box of rocks to risk your security, and I have to wonder how exactly a robber knew that they could easily break into your house. Comment 2. No way. Not the idiot, and congratulations on pushing back at the friends who think it's okay for a house guest to leave your property wide open to robbery and you and your husband to danger. Dan clearly has no perception of risk. Glad it wasn't worse for you, and stand your ground. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading my last post. So here's what happened next. After Dan moved out, things were tense for a while. My husband and I were constantly on edge, worried about our safety and the fallout from our decision. We had to change our locks and update our security system to make sure nothing like this would happen again. It was a stressful time, but we managed to get through it together. A few days after Dan left, my husband got a call from one of their mutual friends, Mark. Mark was furious, accusing us of abandoning Dan when he needed us the most. My husband tried to explain our side of the story, but Mark wouldn't listen. He hung up, and we didn't hear from him for a while. Then about a week later, we got another call, this time from Dan himself. He sounded desperate and asked if he could come over to talk. My husband and I were hesitant, but we agreed to meet him at a nearby coffee shop instead of our house. When we got there, Dan looked exhausted and disheveled. He told us that he had been staying at various friends' places, but no one would let him stay for more than a night or two. He had even spent a couple of nights in a homeless shelter, which was a wake-up call for him. Dan apologized for his actions and admitted that he had been selfish and irresponsible. He said he understood why we kicked him out and didn't blame us for it. He also revealed that he had been struggling with some personal issues, including a recent breakup and problems at work. He asked if there was any way we could help him get back on his feet. My husband and I were torn. On one hand, we felt sorry for Dan and wanted to help him. On the other hand, we were still angry and hurt by what he had done. We decided to give him a chance, but with strict conditions. We told him that he could stay with us for 1 week, but he had to find a job and a more permanent place to live during that time. He also had to follow our house rules and respect our boundaries. Dan agreed to our terms and we let him stay in our guest room. The first few days were awkward, but Dan seemed genuinely grateful for the second chance. He spent most of his time job hunting and looking for apartments. My husband and I kept a close eye on him, making sure he didn't break any of our rules. One evening, while we were having dinner, Dan opened up about his past. He told us about his troubled childhood and how he had always felt like the black sheep of his family. His parents had high expectations for him, but he never seemed to measure up. He had struggled in school and barely graduated, which only added to his feelings of inadequacy. Dan admitted that he had always relied on his friends for support, but he now realized that he needed to take responsibility for his own life. Hearing Dan's story made us see him in a different light. We still didn't condone his actions, but we understood where he was coming from. It was clear that he had a lot of unresolved issues and needed help to overcome them. My husband and I decided to support him as much as we could, but we also made it clear that he had to put in the effort to change. By the end of the week, Dan had found a part-time job at a local grocery store and secured a room in a shared apartment. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He thanked us for giving him another chance and promised to stay in touch. We wished him well and hoped that he would make the most of this opportunity. In the days that followed, my husband and I reflected on everything that had happened. We realized that our decision to help Dan, despite our initial anger, had brought us closer together. We had faced a difficult situation and come out stronger on the other side. It wasn't easy, but we were proud of how we handled it. As for Dan, he continued to make progress. He reached out to a therapist to work on his personal issues and started attending support group meetings. He also reconnected with some of his old friends, who were willing to give him another chance now that he was making an effort to change. Our mutual friends eventually stopped criticizing us and even apologized for their harsh words. They saw that Dan was taking responsibility for his actions and making positive changes in his life. It was a long and difficult journey, but we were all hopeful that Dan would finally find the stability and happiness he had been searching for. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for refusing to let my husband dictate what car I drive? A few months ago, my 34-year-old female car was totaled in a freak accident. Thankfully, no one was hurt. No one was in the car. We finally settled with insurance, and I'm starting the car buying process again. I decided that since my old car was very basic, I wanted to buy something a little nicer since I'm starting the car buying process over. My old car was a base model SUV. For my new car, I was hoping to purchase something that had heated seats and a power tailgate. I use my car frequently to travel for sports. I haul equipment back and forth. Having a power tailgate seemed useful. We are also trying to start a family, so I was car shopping with that in mind as well. Insurance gave me enough money to use as a down payment on the new car, so I will need to finance. My husband, 34-year-old male, started to float the idea of him buying me a car. He drives an older station car, and my car was our weekend car or trip car. I have declined his offer many times because he is really pushing me to buy an electric vehicle. I do not think an electric vehicle is really the right car for me or my needs. I don't want one, I drive long distances, and I don't want the anxiety of having to charge it away from home. I found 2 cars that I liked and went to test drive both of them. I felt like I found my new car and was excited to move forward. My husband gave me this long speech about how he wanted to buy the car for me and how I didn't get a fancy engagement ring or wedding ring, and how he wanted to do this for me. He told me I could get whatever car I wanted, including one of these 2 vehicles. Neither are flashy, but both fit my needs and have those extra features I want. We are not talking about luxury cars. After the test drive, we talked at home and both decided on which of the 2 cars we should get. We were going back to the dealership the next day to test drive it again and move forward. The day of the test drive, my husband calls me and says that he made an appointment, same time as the test drive, for us to test drive an electric vehicle, a Chevy Bolt. He said he always wanted to test drive an electric vehicle and that I should go and be open-minded. I obliged and went on the test drive. I did not like the car at all, and the storage space was not what I need. It's a very small vehicle compared to what I am used to driving. My husband was very excited, and when I expressed my dislike for the car, he told me that I was behaving like a spoiled teenager. I really don't need him to buy me anything. It would be nice to not have a monthly car payment. But this car would likely limit my ability to travel and participate in my sports with friends. I also don't see it being a good option for having a child. Am I the jerk for declining my husband's offer and buying my own car? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, you're not the jerk. He told me that I was behaving like a spoiled teenager. That's Rich. He is the one completely ignoring your opinions. He is the one trying to push you into what he wants you to have. You are the one who took the time to make your decision and even agreed to test drive his idea of an ideal car. If he wants an electric vehicle that badly, he can get one for himself and stop trying to force his opinion down your throat, then acting like a petulant adolescent when you don't want to appease him. Comment 2, I truly think you should reconsider having children with this man anytime soon. He is showing you a sneak peek of his controlling side. Once you're pregnant or have a baby, it may be the catalyst for him to reveal the true extent of his controlling nature. This is a red flag. You should start looking for other red flags that could warn you of his true nature. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So after the whole Chevy Bolt test drive fiasco, things have gotten even more complicated. The day after the test drive, my husband and I had a pretty heated argument. He was still pushing for the electric vehicle, and I was adamant about getting the car that fit my needs. It wasn't just about the car anymore. It felt like a power struggle. He accused me of not appreciating his gesture and said I was being stubborn. I told him that while I appreciated his offer, I needed a car that suited my lifestyle and future plans. We ended up not speaking much for the rest of the day. The next morning, I decided to go back to the dealership alone to finalize the purchase of the car I had originally chosen. I felt a bit guilty for not involving him, but I knew I had to make a decision that was right for me. When I got to the dealership, I was informed that the car I wanted had been sold the previous evening. I was devastated. I called my husband to tell him what happened, hoping he would understand my frustration. Instead, he seemed almost relieved and suggested we go back to test drive the Chevy Bolt again. I hung up the phone, feeling more alone than ever. That evening, we had another argument. He couldn't understand why I was so against the electric vehicle, and I couldn't understand why he was so insistent on it. It was like we were speaking different languages. I finally broke down and told him that I felt like he wasn't listening to me or respecting my needs. He looked genuinely hurt and said he just wanted to do something special for me. We ended up going to bed without resolving anything. The next day, I decided to take a different approach. I called my best friend and asked her to come with me to look at cars. She knew about the whole situation and was supportive of my decision to get a car that fit my needs. We spent the day visiting different dealerships, and I finally found another car that I liked. It wasn't exactly the same as the one I had originally wanted, but it had all the features I needed. I decided to put a deposit down and told the dealership I would be back with my husband to finalize the purchase. When I got home, I told my husband about the new car. He seemed a bit more open to the idea this time, but I could tell he was still not entirely on board. We agreed to go to the dealership together the next day. That night, we had a long talk about our future and our plans for starting a family. I told him that I needed a car that would be practical for our future needs, and he finally seemed to understand where I was coming from. We went to bed feeling a bit more connected, but I knew we still had a long way to go. The next day, we went to the dealership together. My husband was still a bit hesitant, but he agreed to go through with the purchase. As we were signing the paperwork, he suddenly asked the salesperson if they had any electric vehicles available. I couldn't believe it. I felt like we were back to square one. The salesperson showed us a few options, and my husband seemed genuinely interested. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I didn't want to fight anymore, but I also didn't want to give in. We left the dealership without finalizing the purchase. On the drive home, we had another argument. I told him that I felt like he was trying to control my decision, and he told me that he felt like I was being unreasonable. We were at an impasse. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about our future and whether this was a sign of deeper issues in our relationship. I loved my husband, but I couldn't help but feel like we were growing apart. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity. I realized that this wasn't just about the car. It was about our communication and respect for each other's needs. I decided to sit down with my husband and have an honest conversation. I told him that I loved him and appreciated his gesture, but I needed him to respect my decision. I also told him that I was willing to compromise and look into hybrid options that might suit both of our needs. To my surprise, he agreed. We spent the day researching hybrid vehicles and found a few options that we both liked. We went to a dealership and test drove a couple of them. By the end of the day, we had found a car that we both felt good about. It wasn't exactly what either of us had initially wanted, but it was a compromise that we could both live with. As we drove home in our new car, I felt a sense of relief. We had finally found a solution that worked for both of us. I knew that this was just one of many challenges we would face in our marriage, but I felt hopeful that we could work through them together. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.